All right, we're going to get started with our last block of sessions for today. I sort of see people. I can't see anything. All right. So let's get started with our first session. We're still looking at authentication in identity in financial services. And to kick that off, please help me welcome to the stage Sarah Clark, who is the SVP of Digital Identity at Mastercard.
Hi, everybody. I'm Sarah Clark, as I guess was already said. My title is SVP of Digital Identity at Mastercard. And before I get into the slides, I'll just start by saying, despite being from Mastercard, I am not going to be talking about payments. My business is actually responsible for building a new network for Mastercard, the Identity Network, or the ID Network. It's a completely new network. Obviously, we feel that our experience and success with a payment network at scale leads us to being qualified to embark on a journey to build an ID network. But the ID network has no dependency to the payment network. So I want you to really think about what I'm presenting to you as a new network. You don't need a Mastercard to be part of the ID network. The experience carries over, but otherwise, from a regular person's standpoint, they're not directly related. So let me go ahead and get started. So we are focused on digital identity. So what we're building is a reusable digital identity network that's globally interoperable. So I'd like to provide a bit of context by starting with the very basic question of, what do I mean by a digital identity? So a digital identity answers the fundamental question, are you who you claim to be? And the way that we're looking at this is that it's really rooted in evidence that was presented that can prove that. So we are not solving right now for the 1 billion people that do not have a form of physical identity. We're focused on those that do have a government-issued or a citizen identity. So really core to what a digital identity is for us is it contains evidence such as a government-issued driver's license or passport that are verified strongly to a root of trust that prove you are who you claim to be. And this can, of course, be augmented with multiple pieces of evidence. It's augmented by other signals and attributes about your device and your location. But fundamentally, part of how we're building the ID network means that you had a government-issued form of ID strongly checked as part of your digital identity. So we are focused on the field of a reusable digital ID. So what that means is that conceptually, you as an individual present your evidence once, you onboard into the ID network, and then from that point forward, you can share your digital ID easily and seamlessly anywhere in the world you choose to do business. So we support digital interactions that are omni-channel. Right now we're working across mobile, web, support chat, telesales or customer support call-in, as well as in person. And our vision is very simple. Similar to how you can use your Mastercard anywhere you go to make a payment, you should be able to use your reusable digital identity anywhere in the world you choose to do business that requires trust. So it's a big vision. Obviously, we're starting in select markets. Right now, this is not just a vision, so we're live fully in 2 markets, and we're active in 7 markets globally. So why now? Why invest in reusable digital ID now? There's a lot of momentum that's converging in the global industry. So the first has to do simply with rising expectations regarding user experience. It's ridiculous that in order to do business with a bank and then maybe a sharing company, that you have to go through the same steps basically or in a slightly different form in order to onboard. How many people enjoy going through account opening forms in this room? 1. So in all seriousness, nobody enjoys it as trust and fraud become bigger issues. The process continues to evolve. You have to scan your driver's license. You need to go through KBA questions, et cetera. So the marketplace of consumers as a whole wants easier and easier solutions. The opportunities are with account opening, reauthentication, transaction verification, and account recovery. The opportunities span just about every vertical you can imagine. Trust is required for lots of things that we do online or in person. As some examples, we're working with wireless companies for account opening. We're working with digital banks for KYC. We're working with universities for university life. So we're working with age verification for liquor sales, age verification for getting discounts on the public metro. So there's a lot of use cases where easy user experience and trust are required, and being able to easily reassert your identity is the solution of the future. I probably don't need to tell the folks in this room that identity fraud is a problem, and unfortunately, it continues to grow. So at some point, the paradigm needs to change. And what we're finding is that people are becoming more aware of data breaches, of identity fraud, and more interested in solutions that are privacy preserving and that protect their data. So that's exactly what the concept of a reusable ID done well should do. It means that you as an individual own your own digital identity. Your data belongs to you. It's decentralized. It sits on your device. And you have transparency and you provide consent in order to share it. And the last driver that I want to point out is driven by governments. So governments have been investing in their own digital identity initiatives. Here in the United States, many of you might be aware of the transformation of our driver's licenses to also make available mobile driver's licenses, or MDLs. And that's not unique only to the United States. That's happening in many other countries, maybe in slightly different forms. But there are a lot of initiatives globally by governments to move forward with that, and that continues to accelerate. So there is a big opportunity to take those strong, digital-ready, government-issued credentials and make them available more broadly to the commercial market. And that's also an opportunity that we are very active in, and public-private partnerships between us and governments is certainly something that we're very engaged with. So what is our ID service? It's a reusable digital ID service that is enabled on an individual's smartphone. And these phones provide an example of the user journey. So you might notice I'm wearing a t-shirt with a logo ID. You also see the Verify with ID button on the page, so on the second phone. So this is an example of a age-restricted purchase where somebody must prove that they are above a certain age in order to move forward. So they see the ID trust mark. You can think of this as analogous to the Mastercard logo. You see that, and you know you can use your credit card. An individual sees the ID trust mark, and they know that they can use their reusable digital ID. So they click that. They choose their identity provider. I'll talk a bit more about what that means in a minute. And then they can proceed with the transaction. So in order to proceed, they need to unlock their digital ID, and they do that using a biometric. So we have never used passwords as part of our solution. We've always used the concept that a biometric gets binded to a digital ID on the device. So they use their biometric to open their digital ID. They see what the business is asking for in terms of which data they're being requested to share. They give consent to share, and then the transaction is completed. So this is a very basic example where all it needs to pass is confirmation that the individual is above a certain age. But the world of possibility is huge. So a digital ID can not only contain proof that you are who you claim to be, it could also contain multiple credentials to power a world of use cases that can make everyone's lives easier. And I won't go into a lot of detail because I know we don't have a lot of time. So some of the pillars of our business, and I would say the pillars of any well-formed digital ID ecosystem, are that it must be privacy preserving. So we use a decentralized design, again, meaning the data resides with the individual on the individual's device. We are not creating any honeypots of PII. We are part of the future solution, I would say, to breaking that paradigm and creating something new that is truly privacy preserving. We leverage data minimization. So in this case, the only information that's passed is confirmation that that individual passes the age bar that's required. No PII is needed. No driver's license is needed to be shared. So oversharing of PII is something that should not happen. And again, transparency and consent before sharing. So we are not building the entire global, ecosystem on our own. Behind that user experience that I just shared with you is the ID network. So the ID network consists of multiple roles. We have the people sort of in the upper left. Those are individuals who own their own digital ID. In the upper right, we have relying parties, or those are the businesses that want to verify IDs. In the lower right, we have identity verification providers. So although we do partner with governments to tap into root of trust checks for government-issued credentials, we also leverage a range of identity proofing providers So we have the strongest identity proofing possible to onboard somebody into the network. If it's very strong then, and then layered with signals throughout, we know we have a solution that's injecting high trust into the global ecosystem. So we do have layers in our identity proofing process. And then the lower left are identity providers. So these are entities that provide the app that's the home base for the individual to manage and share their digital identity from. And then we, of course, manage the network, which has quite a lot of aspects to it. I'll just point out in very basic terms that when an identity is shared with a business, that business expects that identity to be well vetted and valid. And should something fraudulent happen, there needs to be clear operating rules and recourse, if appropriate, in that event. So that's part of the governance, that's part of the centralized issue resolution, and then there are operating rules for all roles that protect the integrity of the network. So how does all of this relate to FIDO? So FIDO is something that we decided to move forward with driven by our commitment to user experience excellence. So that was really our main driver, and it's also well aligned with our second guiding principle of high trust. We also are building a network that is standards-based, so FIDO fits within our goal and our pillar to embrace standards. We also see the strong coalition of other players that are embracing FIDO, and for us, that really means that there will be capabilities that we can leverage going forward, as well as new modalities that may be seamless for us to implement to our user experience. So let me talk a bit about how FIDO is, the value that FIDO adds. So the first point of value that FIDO adds to us is faster performance. So we have never used passwords, but we do use biometrics as our core authentication technique. We use a proprietary mechanism that we've been happy with in terms of meeting our standards for trust. But we have not seen the level of performance that we really require or expect when it comes to ongoing authentication. So FIDO is something that somebody can do very, very quickly. There's no wait for something to go to a server or a cloud. So we're seeing much faster performance than proprietary authentication systems. It's cost effective as the system scales. New modalities can be achieved with minimal development. So right now we're very focused on facial biometrics, but we're looking to expand that as we integrate FIDO. Extensibility to web may be relevant to the roadmap. So what FIDO's done with cross browser support, we're interested in, not quite sure how that aligns with our roadmap, but we are experimenting with web wallets and other innovations. And a reduced number of touch points with the mobile app compared to proprietary authentication systems, so less points of possible system failure. So how is it implemented? I think maybe we have a bit of a unique approach to how we've implemented FIDO. So our existing authentication process will continue to exist, and that will continue to be used when individuals are onboarded into the reusable ID network. And there are reasons for that with respect to how we check the face compared to other pieces of evidence. We have plugged in FIDO via our Mastercard biometric authentication service. And I mention that because that's actually a shared service at Mastercard. My team is the first to implement FIDO, but will not be the last to bring FIDO to market, so it's certainly of interest to other parts of Mastercard. We have it so that individuals can optionally register for FIDO as part of their initial enrollment process or at any time thereafter. And if they do enroll, from that point forward, the FIDO registered users will be run through a rules engine. So we have multiple layers of signals that are enacted with every authentication into the ID network. And should one of those signals say that something is risky, we may step the customer away from FIDO and back to our existing authentication method. But generally, we expect that individuals who have signed up for FIDO will use FIDO most of the time. We expect it to be very rare that the rules would trigger something that would require a step up. So some of the rules that we have are based off of NewDetect. So that is a behavioral biometrics capability that is part of Mastercard. It was an acquisition from a few years ago. We have velocity rules. We have assurance levels that our relying parties can request. If something is requested that's very sensitive or very high assurance, we might step up. We have distance rules and other compliance rules. So that sounds like a lot of rules, but what we expect is that most individuals will use FIDO. We think they're going to get a much better user experience from using FIDO. And we're really excited to get a bit more experience with this in market to kind of learn more. We're at the very early stages right now of getting FIDO out. So I think that's what I had to share with you. We have a couple minutes left. Can maybe take a couple questions?
Oh my gosh, we do have a few minutes. Thank you. So I do have a few questions in the app. One of the questions, so you just mentioned, Sarah, and thank you for the presentation, it was great, that you're in early stages. Can you comment on like what markets you're in at this stage, or is it still just very early days?
So I can comment that we're fully live in Australia as well as Brazil.
Oh, that's great. And then a question regarding interoperability. So there have been other digital identity networks that have emerged. How do you view these coexisting, and how are you viewing that from a consumer perspective, meaning would they be able to maybe share across networks, for example?
Yeah, so most likely they could be partners with us, kind of depending, I guess. But we would see, like, for example, if there's an in-country digital identity network that wanted to expand the reach that they have to cross-border, they could plug onto the ID network and we could facilitate the cross-border transactions. So kind of going back to we're not building it all ourselves. In general, we're partner-friendly. And the identity provider role that I explained could be another ID network.